Welcome everyone to Living with the Times. This week's Torah portion is Vayakel. And here Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the second tablets. And Vayakel means he gathered all the people together and he began to tell them about the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And that takes up the entire portion, except for the very beginning, there's a few verses where Moshe, when he gathers them together, tells them the importance of keeping Shabbat. And then it goes straight into the construction of the Mishkan. So everyone asks, why does it have to tell us about Shabbat again? We've been told a number of times in the Torah about Shabbat, and especially the idea that the construction of the Mishkan does not override the Shabbat. So why again? And so here, despite the fact that the Torah already has described making the Mishkan, but this was, as it were, instructions from God to Moshe. Here, for the first time, he gathers the people together and tells them about the construction of the Mishkan. So the first idea is what's called the simple idea when we look at the structure called Pardes, where we look at each verse, each story, each mitzvah in the Torah according to four different levels. Pshat, the literal meaning, the simple storyline, the remez, the hinted or alluded to meaning, the drush, the allegorical, metaphorical, symbolic meaning, and the sod, the secret, mystical, spiritual meaning. So here, the simple meaning is, now that the people are hearing for the first time about making the tabernacle, they need to be told or even warned and explained that as holy an enterprise as building the Mishkan is, it does not supersede keeping Shabbat. So that's the pshat, the simple literal meaning. On the level of remez, the fact that Shabbat and the Mishkan are juxtaposed, and this is not the first time. A number of times already, when we're talking about the Mishkan, Shabbat will be mentioned. And therefore, the sages, through the oral tradition, all the way back to Moses, received the idea that the instruction not to work on Shabbat is called malacha. And this is the exact same word that is used for the creative enterprise of building the Mishkan. The works of the Mishkan were called also malacha. And so here we learn that all the laws, the 39 cardinal types of laws that were forbidden to do on Shabbat, are learned from the exact main kinds of work that went into the construction of the Mishkan. And so here, the juxtaposition before Moshe begins to tell the people about building the Mishkan is the description of Shabbat, but here it's to tell us that the very work that in this portion the Shabbat is warning us not to do is the very same work that is what was used to construct the Mishkan. So that's on the level of remez, the alluded to meaning. On the level of drasha, we have this idea that going back to Parsha Truma, God says, "V'asuli mikdash v'shechanti betocham." Make for me a holy place, a mikdash, a holy place, and I will dwell in their midst. So the Mishkan represents holy space. Today we relate to a synagogue as a holy space, or the Mishkan as a holy space. And even on Shabbat, we relate to our homes as a holy place. But on the level of time, Shabbat represents holy time, or the other holidays are called holy time. So here, the juxtaposition of Shabbat and the Mishkan is telling us about the connection between holy space and holy time. And on the level of Sod, the more mystical, spiritual meaning, here we have something that is already alluded to in the Torah, but it took thousands of years until Albert Einstein revealed the intrinsic connection between time and space. Until Einstein, time and space were considered like apples and oranges, two different entities. And Einstein showed and he proved the intrinsic connection between time and space, called the time-space continuum. And so here, the Torah is already alluding to the fact that even though we're talking about a holy space and a holy time, but they're not really different. They're very, very connected. So how can we relate to that on a personal, experiential level? So when we go into a holy place, when we, let's say in Israel, visit a holy place, or even come into a synagogue or a Beit Midrash, and there's something special there. And so when we're in holy space, then our experience of time also becomes holy time. The holy space affects and influences the time that we spend there. And the same thing with Shabbat. Shabbat is the epitome of holy time, but because we're in this headspace of the whole 24 hours of Shabbat, we're enveloped in holy time, then the way we relate to the places, the spaces that we're in, also become holy. And so going back to the original statement by God as the reason for making the Mishkan is v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. God says, make me a holy space and I will dwell in it. But it's the same thing with time. When we make time holy, when we designate time as being holy, then it affects us. It affects us deeply. And so this idea on Shabbat, when we're enveloped with holy time, then the home becomes a holy vessel for the bliss and the spirituality of Shabbat. And ultimately, all space has the potential to become holy space, and all time in potential can be holy time. That's why we're told that after Mashiach comes, there will be a time in the future that's called Yom Shekulu Shabbos. All of time will have the holy atmosphere, the ambience of Shabbat. And it's the same thing with space. Sometimes we relate to certain spaces as being holy and other spaces as being regular, mundane. But also in the future, not only will all time become holy, we will relate to all space as being holy. And that would be the ultimate revelation of the time-space continuum, when all of time and space becomes a vessel for holiness. May we merit to experience that right now, and in the future, it should spread to the whole world.